Grand Dawning, Great Rising, Cleveland, Ohio. This is 360 Info Network. I'm Vince Robinson. Our host, Hamtonio, is off this morning, but we should be seeing him next week. We have a great show lined up for you today. And as we have this conversation, I have guests logging in. Today, we are going to be talking about food insecurity, among other things. Recently had a conversation with Lena Boswell, who is a earth steward. She's an earth keeper. Those are the two things that resonate with me as she describes herself. We had a conversation which has led to this conversation, and she introduced me to a young lady by the name of Celeste. And you can see her meme there on the screen. We're going to try to get her logged in so that you can actually see her as well. But we're going to talk about food in our community. It is a very important issue because it's so important for us to be getting good food and for us to practice healthy living. So hopefully we'll be able to pass along some information for you. So I want to introduce you to Lena Boswell. And I also see her name is Celeste. Celeste, I haven't met you before, so I want you to pronounce your name for me and give us your title. You are connected with an organization called Ag Noir. It's an urban farming association. It's a BIPOC urban farming association, and we want to get all the details about what that is and how it relates to the subject of food insecurity. So tell us your name and tell us your position.
Mm. Hello, I'm Celeste Treese. My position is the founder of Ag Noir BIPOC Farming Association, and the association was founded so that farmers could come together and network and build relationship and community with one another, and that we also come together and collectively strategize and advocate for our needs so that we can continue to solve a lot of the food insecurity problems that are going on. We know the government and and a lot of people have a lot of rules around food security, and that's the reason why we're in a position. So we're coming together to advocate to remove some of those barriers.
Okay. I just happened to watch a video on YouTube last night that features three members of a food co-op here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's called the Little Africa Food Cooperative. Alina Boswell is on the board for this particular organization, and I was really, really excited to hear about the focus of your organization and how that relates to the idea of urban farming and a title or a term that came up called food apartheid, which is really kind of timely right now, considering the fact that our food supply is being manipulated. And you know that Henry Kissinger once said long ago, if you want to control a people, you control their food. And what we're seeing right now is even more of a move to control food by virtue of the fact that you have billionaires like Bill Gates that are buying up, acres and acres of farmland. There's this movement towards lab grown meat and other kinds of things. We have a lot of artificial food in our food supply, which is wreaking havoc on the health of our citizens because the food is making them sick. So there's a lot to unpack in our conversation today, but I just thought that it was important to hear your voice, to hear Lena's voice, and to make some suggestions about things that people can do to improve the quality of their health by including or improving the quality of their food. And improving the quality of their food means that they're getting more of their food from local sources. So I'm going to have you talk about the I guess the focus of your organization and how it relates to folks like us and Lena who are up here in Cleveland looking at our options when it comes to food.
Well, the focus of the organization is to influence the policies makers. And I think it's instrumental when we talk about how do we encourage people to purchase what is really more nutrition dense food. And that's purchasing from your local farmers. I think that people disassociate, particularly black people disassociate themselves from farming and what it really means to be a steward of the land. just because of like historically what has been tied to slavery, and a lot of what we've been doing is trying to change that narrative, to get people to understand that, it's not a negative connotation to be connected with the earth. And farming, is something that we should be proud of. It's something that we should lean into because it's essentially what thrives our body and gives us the quality of life that we want. And so when we think about, when you're purchasing something local, not only are you supporting local farmers and the local economy, you're also getting the most nutrition dense food. And I want to continue to uplift that. A lot of people think because you buy organics, that you're eating the most nutritious food, and you're not. There are a lot of factors like soil health, that contribute to how nutrient your produce is. And so I would just encourage folks, when you think about the cost of food, gas goes into that, emissions goes into the air. And those are all things that affect our health. And so when you are purchasing from a local farmer, not only are you supporting, your local economy, you're getting the most nutrient dense food, and you're also, you know, participating in sustainable practices because you are not getting something that came, something that's been on the road for 10 days has been in the store for additional 5 days. So you're getting something that was grown or picked within a week, and you're getting to purchase that. So I will encourage folks to continue to, you know, support your local produce markets, continue to talk to your farmers who grow the food, and get ideas, about how to prepare your food. A lot of times we hear, well, we don't know what an eggplant is. We don't know how to prepare that. And so I think, just working with your local farmers to learn holistically how you can prepare these meals, will move a lot of us forward.
I can't hear.
Yeah, I can't hear either.
Okay. Want to bring Lena Boswell into the conversation right now. Sorry, I had my microphone muted. Um, I want to bring her into the conversation and talk to her about the beginning of Little Africa Food Co-op. It's been around for a few years, and in that video, I listened to the executive director Mickey Smith talk about the beginning of that organization. Angela Sales was also on. She's the treasurer of Little Africa Food Co-op, and Telia, who is probably the person who birthed it. She talked about how it was a response to the homicide of Philando Castile. And she talked about how, they just decided that she wanted to do something about it. And she connected with a few other people, including Mickey, who decided she would jump in. And then Angela, of course, she didn't engineer a hostile takeover. It was a friendly takeover, but I'm sure that whatever she did, it enabled the organization to take wings and to do what they do. So talk to us about what Little Africa does with relation to the idea of food apartheid in Cleveland.
Okay, thank you so much, Vince. Giving honor and gratitude to the ancestors this morning, on whose shoulders I stand. I always do that because I have to be mindful and remember where I come from. And so I would not be here. I would not be able to do the things that I do. I would not be even farming had it not been for the ancestors. So to my departed mother and father, William and Josephine Boswell, Shay. So as far as Little Africa Food Co-op, they were, as you said, they came together as a result of the Philando Castile murder and decided that the co op model would be a great model to use. Now, the co op model in history has been used by African American Blacks for centuries, for a long, long time. Um, there's a book by Jessica Gordon Nemhart. I believe the book name is Collective Courage. That would be a great book to read in order to know the landscape of food co-ops all over the country. And the whole idea behind food co-op is exactly the operative word, which is co-op, to cooperate together to be able to build a food system. I believe that Fannie Lou Haber had a food co-op as well, and she started with pennies. and and built it to something that was very significant. So we use that model in the spirit of cooperation. And right now, what I know of the model that Little Africa is promoting, first of all, their motto is to produce their own food and be in control of their own food. And that's something that I promote. I've been promoting for years with the gardens and farms that I've been associated with. And at this point, it is critical that we look into models such as the co-op to support us in feeding ourselves. Um, it's well, that's kind of what I know about the food co-op when as it relates to Little Africa Food Co-op. Right now, I think they're moving more towards a producer type model, a co-op of producers, those who do value-added products. We were doing, I believe, a more traditional model, as in those former models, but I think we're moving more now towards a producer owner and supporting those people who grow the food, who make value-added products, as I said, and moving forward. Excuse me, control over the food is paramount. It's first and foremost. Like you said, Vince, he who controls the food controls the people. And our people have shown great agency in the ways that we have taken care of ourselves and produced for ourselves. So it makes sense to Sankofa and go back to some of those practices that are tried and tested and have evidence to support our economy, support our health and well-being, and support our overall all life.
Okay, I want to have you talk about, and you just kind of alluded to how the paradigm shift is taking place in terms of the model that you're dealing with. I also know that there have been efforts to, I guess, have a local presence in terms of bricks and mortar. Can you talk about what Little Africa is doing venue-wise? What kinds of facilities do you have in place at present?
Currently, we have 3 sites identified, and so within those sites, there's going to be a capital improvement project that we need to undergo. There is some maintenance that has to undertaken with a couple of those buildings. But right now, none of those buildings are really activated right now. So we are really just focusing on funding. We're focused on getting zoning. We're focused on a number of things to be able to get those up and running. Now, I do know excuse me, and I believe these are in the Kinsman area, if I'm not mistaken. I think Miss Angela would probably be a better person to articulate that, but I'm gonna do the best I can. So I believe these are in the Kinsman area, if I'm not mistaken, um, and it's 3 buildings. One of them actually was donated, um, and one of them is slated to be, I believe, a kitchen, some type of a kitchen, like a test kitchen. So this will be a place where producers, farmers, and that will be able to come and test out their products if they want to do a value-added product, and have a place to do that. And so I don't know, like, because I actually have come into Little Africa as a board member within the last couple of years. So I'm still being brought up to scale on the extent of what's going on. So um, I apologize for not being able to address it fully this morning.
Okay. Well, I pledged to do another show, and I traded text messages with Miss Mickey this morning, and I told her that we'll do it perhaps on this station, perhaps on another station, but I want to bring folks in because I just really think that it's important that we talk about this, that we raise awareness about it, and most of all, we connect people with the food. You know, a lot of food gets grown in our city in the summertime, but from what I'm hearing, sometimes it goes unused, or people don't really take advantage of it to the extent that they could because they're stuck in the paradigm of going to the Daves and the Giant Eagles and getting that produce. But based on the conversation that we had the other day, uh, we get produce from other parts of the country and other parts of the world, and the locally grown produce is really the best produce for us. But the other issue that we have, and I'm sure you can speak to this, Celeste, is the fact that so much education is required to get our folks up to speed on why it's important to eat locally grown food. I want to shift gears though, Celeste, and talk to you about your efforts to lobby on behalf of
Mhm.
groups and organizations that see the importance of locally grown food. You talked about advocacy. Can you talk about the way that Ag Noir is lobbying and connecting with legislators to raise the issue of food apartheid and things that we can do to improve the quality of our food supply?
Thank you. The reason why I founded Ag Noir is because as an urban farmer, we were running into issues with zoning, and funding. And I think the biggest thing that we've tried to do is show up. A lot of times people make these policies that are not from our communities and don't understand the importance of our work. And so the biggest thing for us to come together and collectively be on one accord. So just to give an example, it's Farm Bill year. And the Farm Bill determines how funding is made. When it comes to agriculture, it also determines SNAP benefits, and nutrition in our schools. All of that is determined within the Farm Bill. And historically, as we know, Black farmers have been turned away from the USDA. They have not gotten the support of their counterparts of not just rural farmers, but, white farmers in general. And so what we've tried to come together is to tell the state and the federal government is that, hey, we need support in building out with these regional food systems. Lucky for us, COVID really put, tore the band-aid off of how weak our supply chain was. And now we see, all politicians saying we need to strengthen regional food systems. And so what we've done is go to the federal government. Lucky for us in Ohio, we have two representatives that actually sit on the agriculture committee. So on the Senate side, we have Senator Sherrod Brown, who sits on the agriculture committee, and on the congressional side, we have Chantel Brown, which is from Cleveland. And so we went to them and gave them our recommendations on how we need to put more funding in urban ag, as well as removing the barriers. And that's the biggest thing we have come together to say. There are barriers, things that most farmers don't have a nonprofit attached to their farm, and you must have a nonprofit to receive funds from the USDA if there are grants. Um, if you have a trafficking drug felony, you're ineligible to receive loans from the USDA. There are a lot of restrictions when it comes to land access. And a lot of times, the cities are kind of tied in, their hands are tied because they have limited resources. So, what we've told the federal government is that we need to remove some of these barriers to access, as well as, make sure that we have mandatory funding in our urban agriculture programs within the USDA, and that they're actually putting the effort towards the outreach of reaching the farmers so that they can take access of the programs. At the state level, we've been talking to the Department of Agriculture as well, saying, hey, you all have all this funding, yet we don't get to see it in our communities. And so we've been saying, put us in the capital budget, put our projects in the capital budget. What a lot of people don't know is you can go to your local representative and request funding for a capital project. And that means, restructuring a building or building a new building. And they are supposed to lobby on your behalf so that you receive those funds to build these structures out. And so, our biggest thing is saying we need the support in the infrastructure so that we can support and scale our farmers. And we can't just keep giving the resources to our commodity based farmers who grow, corn, wheat, and soy and hay like we do in Ohio, but we need to put support into diversified crop farmers, who are really feeding the communities. And so, it's really about us showing up, telling them what our needs are, and making sure that they shift the resources that's necessary for us to scale and continue to educate and feed our communities.
That's a really interesting concept that you just mentioned, commodity-based farming. So essentially what you're talking about is people who are growing food just to make money, but not necessarily to meet the nutritional needs of people who live in their area. You talk about funding and you talk about zoning, which kind of piqued my curiosity in terms of who's getting the money. If we're not getting the money, who's getting the money? And then I guess the second question is, how are they using that money?
Well, many rural farmers,
Mhm.
I hate to use this analogy a lot, but they're on welfare. The amount of subsidies that these rural farmers get, they don't make money without the subsidies from the government. And so these commodity based farmers who work with, Cargill and a lot of these big food producers, even those farmers don't make money. The average rural farmer right now is only bringing home $50,000 a year right now. And so we not only see that stress from, these big food producers on our rural farmers, but we also, really see it when it trickles down to us urban farmers. And so, they get the money. Those big producers get the money, and it kind of leaves the small guy out. Those who want to go into a Dave's or a Kroger, you don't get the price that you deserve for your products. And so those are the folks who are getting the money. They've the ones historically who've gotten all the resources as well as access to the land. And so we're trying to change that narrative. We see the, many Supreme Court decisions around, the mistreatment and discrimination against black farmers, and they're still unwilling to give us what we're owed and deserve. And so what we've tried to do is change the narrative and say, hey, we understand what's happened in the past. We understand that we have not gotten equity, but we are moving into a new way of farming, which is innovation production, vertical farming, aquaponics. And let's not, forget about our past, but let's look towards our future and how we can include black farmers and uplift them with these innovative ways of growing that we're going to continue to see moving forward. And a lot of that is a tribute to climate change. So
Okay. And let's talk about proportions because I would have to imagine that the number of black farmers juxtaposed against the number of white farmers in the state is there's probably a huge disparity. Can you talk about the number of black farmers in Ohio?
when we're looking at traditional farmers and what qualifies you to farm, you have to be registered with the USDA with a farm number. So we have about 2% of black farmers, traditional farmers, when we look at Ohio compared to white farmers.
Hmm.
And they
Okay.
don't account for urban farmers. They haven't counted us yet in the census.
Okay. But what I'm understanding you to say is that many of these white farmers or rural farmers have nonprofits set up. And as a result of having the nonprofits, they have access to funds. Whereas many of us who may have these farms, we don't have the nonprofit set up. So as a result, we can't apply for that fund, for those funds. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's the fact that they get to their programs are what's under rural development, and so just the amount of programs that rural development funds is far more vast than what we're seeing in urban farming.
Okay. All right, so we've established some of the inequities on a large scale, but we can also talk about things that we can do. And you mentioned a few different things. You talked about vertical farming, you talked about hydroponics, and so forth and so on. It's really interesting, Celeste and Lena, uh, the number of foods that we can consume that are natural.
Mhm.
When you look at the plant kingdom and you look at all the fruits and you look at all the vegetables, there are just so many things that we can consume. And there are so many things that we can actually grow in our own environments, so
Mhm.
we can look at what the man is doing, but we can also look at what we can do. So, Lena, I want to talk to you about certain things that we can do in our own respective places. You talked about the other day when we had the conversation, you talked about, I think it was gorilla growing,
Yeah.
something that gorilla gardening, that the
Mhm.
fact that you can do things in your own neighborhood, which might mean that there's a vacant plot next door and nobody's using it, nobody's doing anything to it, and there's all that soil laying there waiting for you to put a seed in it and watch it grow. Talk about the kinds of things that we can do within our own respective environment and our own communities to create food supply for ourselves.
Of course. Well, you mentioned guerrilla gardening, and that's one way, which is actually the way I started. Um, I, when I started growing on a large scale, and that means beyond the front yard, beyond the pots in the front yard, because I actually started on my front porch with pots. So that's one actual way. You can grow a lot of food in pots. It just means picking the right plant that will match the pot. So, for instance, you can grow indeterminate tomatoes, and I did a pretty good lot this year with indeterminate tomatoes, and those are tomatoes that continue to grow up until now. In fact, yesterday I harvested some cherry tomatoes, like about a cup of them. And that's a plant that can go into a 5 gallon pot. And that's a whole nother show. But just as an example, that's an example of a plant that can go into a 5 gallon pot, and you put it out there in the sun, you water it, and you do everything. You can grow herbs in pots. Herbs are things that plants that are perennial, and they come back every year. And so you plant it kind of like and forget it, set it and forget it. There's also a raised bed that you can use, and a raised bed is simply a bed that you grow food in that is slightly above the ground. So you can use wood to fence it off. You can buy metal raised bed containers. There's any number of ways that you can build a raised bed. So you build that raised bed and you plant your vegetables, do the same thing. You're going to water, allow sunlight, and that type of thing. Um, when I started growing on a large scale, meaning across the street from my home, on vacant lots, because they were just tearing down lots, tearing down houses rather. And my thing was, I saw potential. I saw possibilities. I saw the potential to build a food system. And a lot of my ancestors and people who had lived on the street had also farmed on that lot. So I said, well, it's perfect for me to return that piece of earth to its rightful use and grow some food. And so I guerrilla garden. I'm not even going to be lying. I guerrilla gardened on that, which means I just took it over. I had the soil tested because we must make sure that we don't have high concentrations of lead in our soil. So you do your due diligence and you do your homework and then plant it. Um, and I don't even believe I was using Summer Sprout at the time because I do work with Summer Sprout. They offer things like raised bed materials, soil, seeds, and seedlings. But this time I just kind of put my own stuff out there and just threw it out there. And I'm telling you, that was one of the most prolific gardens that I have grown in my life. Now, subsequent gardens beyond that were good, but that one was one of the best because I was trying to work with the city, but the city was taking long, as they typically do. And, when we're farming and when we're gardening, time is of the essence. So you can't string me along and say, well, okay, we'll get you your certification or we'll get you your license in June. That's pretty much the season is over with. We need to be able to hit the ground running in the spring. So that's when I did that, and it turned out to be a very good thing to do. But again, there are many, many, many ways to grow food. We must begin with some type of education in our communities, because a lot of people could really grow some things that will subsidize their food at home in pots or in raised beds or whatever case may be. And the crops that we grow actually are called specialty crops. I believe that's what the crops that we grow, such as beans and tomatoes and cabbage and collard greens, those are considered specialty crops. Now, I learned that about 15 years ago from going to a farm conference where myself and one other person was the only Black people in the room. And because, agriculture is one of the whitest professions in the country. So we are definitely trying to change that because we used to have, Black folks used to have millions of acres of farmland, but through terrorism, through domestic terrorism, through just theft of the land. We have lost a lot of that. So there are people all over the country who are thriving and building to rebuild that. I'm not sure where we're going to get back to where we were, but we're going to come close. We're going to come close.
All right, Celeste, I have to ask you, since you have such a passion for the legal side of it, are you involved in any type of growing or gardening or farming operations?
Yes, I'm director of Jackson Street Farms. My farm is in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland, but I graduated from the University of Cincinnati. And so we have about 100 foot by 100 foot urban farm, and we're looking to grow, to build out, education center, a kitchen, like Lena was saying, so that our caterers, and our small producers have a kitchen to come to make added value products. And that's why we've really been putting the pressure on our land grant universities here in Ohio, to make sure that they spend that money with us and allow our educators in our community to educate our community, because
Hmm.
we don't need, farming is not something that you need a degree for.
Hmm.
And so that's what we've trying to say, is that this is something that, historically belongs to us, and we need you all support, so we can educate more people in our community, and farmers learn from other farmers, and we have all the solutions within our community, and I'm passionate about and shifting those resources to continue to grow what agriculture looks like, and uplift the educators, who've been doing this for years. They need that support to continue to educate our community so that we continue to eat better and live a better quality of life.
Mhm.
Vince,
Speaking, go ahead.
Celeste, let me just shout her out right now in public. Celeste is a powerhouse. When I first met Celeste, I thought I did advocacy work. Mm-mm. No, my work, my work is my work, but I just want to give my shout out and kudos to Miss Celeste for, building such a movement. Because when the first time we went to lobby in Ohio, it was said that it was the first time ever that urban farmers had come to lobby in Columbus. And so that was historical. It was monumental. And I was so proud and happy to be a part of that. There was actually someone else who was slated to go, but they couldn't go. And I was offered the opportunity, and the rest is history. So I'm quite proud to be a member of Ag Noir and the support in support of Miss Celeste's great works.
Well, I have to chime in and just talk about the importance of having a presence in Columbus,
Hmm.
because we have a Republican dominated House and Senate. And as a result, a lot of ideas that are kind of taking us back to the 50s and 60s are gaining a lot of traction. And if you don't show up and express your concerns about things and also bring with it the impact of your vote, the impact of your voice, they'll just run things through and you have no say in what happens. We have little power in this state when it comes to the rights of citizens. One of them is the right of petition. And if you look at the last election that we had, there was an effort to try to take that right away from you.
Hmm.
So I just want to underscore the importance of lobbying, the importance of showing up in Columbus and making your voice heard. But I also, again, want to come back to the importance of what we can do individually within our own respective spheres. So you talked about guerrilla gardening. You talked about having this fabulous 100-acre farm there in Cincinnati. Of course, here in Cleveland, we have Ridall. We
Hmm.
have what Little Africa is doing. We have what different groups are doing in terms of having community farms, and then we also have the various farmers markets. So we do have access to the food, but we talked earlier about the importance of education, and that is educating our people on nutrition. I don't want to say diet. I'll say lifestyle, because
Hmm.
we have this idea about healthy eating, and people say, "Oh yeah, I eat healthy," but they're consuming massive amounts of meat. And I'm not telling you don't eat meat. So, you know, don't shoot the messenger. I would say that you might want to cut back a little bit, because eating too much meat and eating too much of anything can be a problem. But a lot of times we kind of default to eating a lot of meat. I get circulars every Tuesday, and it's interesting to me because one of the circulars that I get on a weekly basis is Dave's, and the whole first page is meat.
Mm-hmm.
you know, I get the flyer from Mark's, and it's the same thing. When I open that thing up and I see all these manufactured products, food products, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't do anything with any of this, but this is what most of what they're selling is. It's really difficult for us to make that paradigm shift into thinking about consumption of more fruits and vegetables and less of the packaged, refined products that are so problematic to our health. Alina, we talked about this earlier in the week when we had the conversation, and sometimes it seems like an exercise in futility. You're talking to your blue in the face and say, "Hey, eat more fruits and vegetables," and people go to the pizza and they go to the Kraft macaroni and cheese. And we talked about the food bank and how a lot of the products that they distribute from these food banks are actually processed foods that are not good for us. And Lena, you even said you don't want to beat people up for the choices that they're making.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question in my mind, and perhaps Celeste, you can chime in on this: how do we educate our people to make better choices when it comes to the things that they consume?
Well, we build the programs. I believe we have to build the programs. We have to build them. We have to put them out there so that they're accessible to the people and go from there. A lot of what I think Celeste mentioned this, that some people don't even know what a Brussels sprout is. Some people don't know what eggplant is. Some people don't know what maybe I don't know, kale is. A lot of people don't eat kale. The green of choice for a lot of Black people is collard greens. Okay, we can grow collard greens. We can grow collard greens right in your front yard. And we can teach you, we can educate you on how to do that. And you can have a beautiful crop. You'll be able to have something that's going to really last you into the wintertime, because collard greens are really best. A lot of people like them best eaten after they've been frostbit, and that means that they have been undergone a frost period, which is coming up. And so what that does with the plant is it turns on their natural antifreeze, which in turn makes them sweeter. So, but we can show people, we can educate them on the right seeds, we can educate them on the right climate to put your foods in. So, what the environment that it needs, how much watering and we have that information because we are the subject matter experts. We have all of this information. So the education piece is something that we are currently working on. I know there's an organization, and I'm going to shout them out today, Hood Honey. They do a wonderful, wonderful piece with youth and adults, and they are an apiary. So what they do, I believe that's the right term, but he grows honey. I mean, he has bees, and his bees produce honey, and he's educating people all over the city about his bees. There is Village Family Farms. They do an education piece, and I believe it's from spring to summer. And so there's many opportunities. We just need to make sure that in our communities, this information is accessible and that the people know about it so that they can go and take advantage. Because we do have programs that are underutilized in terms of participation and, you know, for no reason. So there are places out there, there are programs that we are running so that you won't have to worry about running into people that don't look like you, that don't have your cultural expertise or don't have your cultural knowledge. You can come and you can sit with Mama Earth. That's who I call myself. And I will teach you the ways of the earth. I will teach you how to use this earth medicine as your prescription.
All right. Celeste, did you want to make a comment about the education piece?
Yeah, I think that it's important for us to look at our direct service programs and partner with them to let people know about the additional opportunities for education. So when we're looking at our food banks, um, and our SNAP benefit providers, how do we provide them with those resources so that when people are seeking that direct assistance, that we know need it most, that they're getting that information about the trainings. I think the other essential piece for us to start changing narrative is to get inside of our schools.
Hmm.
In our experience, when we've had our summer youth programs, we were just paying kids $20 a day to come weed in the farm, and that what brought their parents there. Why my kids keep going up to this farm? What are they doing up there? And now the parents got involved. And so to me, it's essential that we continue to educate our youth and put agriculture back into schools. I think that changes the narrative in a big way.
Okay, that's interesting. There's a local urban farmer named Victoria Trotter. I'm sure Lena is familiar with her, and she's like right around the corner from me. She has, I think, at least one hoop house. It might be a couple of hoop houses, but she's growing all kinds of things in there. I think she might even be growing mushrooms right now. So it's just it's phenomenal to know that we have a local food source. And I think you talked about it a little bit earlier, Lena, about how important it is to have access to these kinds of foods against the idea of what we talked about earlier, and that is food being shipped in from other parts of the world. Um, I'm really curious about the education required in terms of farming, in terms of gardening. I know that all soil is not created equal. you
Hmm.
know you see different kinds of dirt. I've been to Africa a few times, and I know over there you see a lot of red clay, you see a lot of red earth. When you see the various videos that you'll find on YouTube and TikTok, and you got these folks that are giving you tips on how to grow things, you always see this deep, dark, rich soil. And then you've got loose soil, and you've got some soil that's really more compact. But I'm just wondering, from you experts in growing things, how do you determine what soil is best for what you're growing, and how do you keep all that knowledge about how to grow certain things? Because some things thrive in a lot of sunlight, some things might thrive in shade. Having all these different nuances involved in growing things. I think there's an education in that in and of itself. And you talked about the fact that you don't need a degree to grow things, but you do have to have knowledge. And
Yeah,
I know some of that is passed down, because
yeah.
grandmom and them, they always had
Come on,
somewhere in the backyard next
come
to the
on.
garage where they were growing the collard greens and tomatoes and peppers
Hmm.
and all kinds of things.
Yes.
What does it take to accumulate that type of knowledge of how to grow stuff?
You know what? I learned at my father's knee. Now he came up here from a forced migration, but let me put that out there, from Birmingham, Alabama. And as with a lot of people who migrated from the South, they brought with them skills. Now, he was only educated to the third grade, but he was able to come up here and buy a home and pay for it. He was able to work job. He worked at Chase Brass and Copper. And he also, in the backyard, had a garden every year. He had a garden every year up until he was 90 years old. So I learned at his knee. He brought me outside when I saw him sprinkling white stuff on the collard greens. He told me, okay, well, this is lime, I believe he spread on there in order to keep the bugs down. And he grew the most beautiful collard greens you ever seen in your life. So that's one of the ways that we can get things passed down. There's so much resources, there's so many information. Like we said, there are plenty of people that we must get connected to in Cleveland who have this knowledge, and it was also passed down to them. Some of this knowledge they have acquired through their education. Now, we did mention that you don't need a degree to grow food. You don't, but you still need to know soil science, and If we look at the landscape now and what's going on in the country, it is predicted that by 2050, the soil, the commercial soil to grow, is going to be depleted of nutrients. Because what they do is they grow what's called monocrops. And Miss Celeste mentioned that. They are soy, corn, uh, wheat,
Wheat.
and I forget there's one more maybe. But there's four main crops that they grow, and what they do is they just keep planting over and over and over, and they don't do anything to remediate the soil. They don't put any organic matter back in the soil or anything like that. This is one of the practices that the white farmers used when they were in America. They called the Dust Bowl. I mean, they just literally just obliterated the soil so much so that it couldn't even hold the plants, and it created just you know, that's history that you can look up. Now, the type of farming we do, we call it regenerative farming, and we use ancient, actually African techniques that a lot of people are calling permaculture, but these were actually gathered, these techniques were actually gathered from the practices of how Africans actually grew food. And so what we do is we take our food scraps and we turn those into soil. We call it black gold. That's what we call it. And we produce some of the most nutrient dense and nutrient rich soil, which is what the plant needs in order to grow into a nutrient dense plant. And so that's just one of the ways, you know, we we take care of our soil, we nurture it. You know, this whole thing for me and a lot of farmers, it's a sacred act. It's a very sacred act. So we approach it in a very sacred and honorable manner, because we know that the end product is something that we want to be pristine for our people. So when we look at industrial versus what we're doing, we feel that our methods are far superior and produce a way better product.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the African aspect of it. And Celeste, I see you smiling. Was there something that you wanted to add to what Miss Lena just shared with us?
I would just say for folks who, you need a little knowledge, I would say find, a black farmer locally or YouTube or TikTok for a person who couldn't keep a plant alive pre-COVID. If I can grow tomatoes, and I'll say start with tomatoes because they seem to be the easiest. But yeah, don't be discouraged because you don't know. You just have to do.
Yeah. Well, I want to add to what Lena said about soil, because we've had conversations with our brother over there at Ridall, and he
Hmm.
brings up the point about the depletion of minerals from the soil. And I want to go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole and talk about chemtrails, because it
Hmm.
is said, and I can't confirm or deny the veracity of what I'm about to share with you, but what is said is that they're dropping aluminum, strontium, and barium
Mm.
from the sky with these trails. And one of the impacts of those chemicals getting into the soil is that it causes depletion of the minerals. Uh, Celeste, I think you brought up the idea of commodity crops, or those crops that they're growing for primarily commercial purposes. When you look at the soy, you look at the corn, you look at the wheat. You're looking at three commodities that are genetically modified, and basically because of that. And again, this is a conspiracy theory again, but they don't study these things because they don't want this information to be widely known and understood, because people would push back on those things. But the genetic modification of those three sources and the widespread, I guess, inclusion of those things in our diet is very problematic.
Hmm.
When you look at soy, you look at corn, 90% of both of those things, 90% of those are genetically modified. So,
Hmm.
when you eat all kinds of things and you have those ingredients in those foods, then you're affected by those things. High fructose corn syrup, for instance, it's used as a sweetener in a lot of different foods. And high fructose corn syrup has the impact of uh, changing your body chemistry in such a way that you don't recognize when you're full.
Hmm.
So you eat something that has high fructose corn syrup and you keep eating and you
Yeah.
don't shut things down, because your body isn't receiving the signal that you're full. And
Mhm.
of course, if you're selling somebody some food, you want them to eat as much as they can so that they empty the bag and go back to the store and get some more of it. But
Mhm.
in the process, you've consumed way too many calories and there's a price to pay. I'm also reminded of some of the most prominent farmers that we've ever known in the history of the United States. And I'm thinking of Booker T. Washington. And I know that he had this idea of the rotation of crops and planting things in proximity to other things that would have
Mhm.
the impact of, steering the bugs away and perhaps being a natural way of, pesticides.
Companion planting. Mhm.
Yeah, that. So there are just so many things that we can do if we have the knowledge of it. And I'm really intrigued by what you said, Lena, about specialty crops
Mhm.
versus the other kind of crop. Um,
Mhm.
the Brussels sprouts, the broccoli, the kale, the things that have the antioxidants. And I'm speaking particularly of fruits, the fruits, the berries, the deep, dark
Mhm.
pigments that you find in certain foods means that there are antioxidants in there. And what the antioxidants do is they fight the presence of free radicals in the body. And the free radicals are the things that are causing, all the destruction that happens in your body. You use the term regenerative farming. You know, these are all things that we need to be conscious and aware of. We eat all this food every day, and a lot of it is waste that ends up going down the garbage disposal and into our water treatment systems and so forth and so on. But we could actually be saving those scraps, using
Mhm.
them to create compost, and then with that compost, we can add to the richness of the soil, and that
Mhm.
will enable us to grow things the way we really want to do it, and we can do it organically in a way that's safe, because someone pointed out in the broadcast earlier that organic doesn't always mean that it's better for you, because
That's true.
sometimes they kind of slip things in there and they don't
Mhm.
tell you that they did it. It's like, and I know this is going off on a tangent, but I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was into textiles and fashion and so forth. And I was saying to her, I wear cotton pants and I try to get natural fabrics and so forth for all the things that I wear. And then she burst my bubble and she said, well,
Mhm.
it could be 100% cotton, but they treated it with something.
Mhm.
So all the effort that I made to get this natural fabric, and
Yeah.
then they ruined it by putting a finish on it that, yeah, it's going to extend the life of the garment, but it's also going to, result in poisons getting into my body. It's really interesting. But I guess the point of all that I'm saying right now is that there are things that we can do that will
Mhm.
make a difference in the quality of our lives. And one of the things that we really need to consider is alternative ways to
Mhm.
create food for ourselves.
Mhm.
Celeste, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of people who really don't even know that you're doing what you're doing, but you're doing it in the interest of saving them. Lena, I
Mhm.
also want to thank you for being an advocate for growing locally, because it's just, as we've said over and over and over in this broadcast, it's so important for us to look at doing things for ourselves and our community. And,
Mhm.
the end result of it is, being a happier person.
Mhm.
If you know that you're growing something and then you can taste that, enjoy the benefit of it, know that you're doing something to make a difference in the lives of your family and families that are connected with you. These are the things that enable us as a group to enjoy a better quality of life. And yes, we
Mhm.
can go to Columbus and we can advocate on behalf of our people, but we can also advocate on behalf of the person that is laying in the bed next to us, and the
Mhm.
children that are in the rooms adjacent to the room that we're sleeping in. We can do things that will impact their lives, so that, yeah, they go to school and they eat that garbage food, but then when they come home, they got something really good to eat. And it's all a result of our awareness and our consciousness. So I want to congratulate you, sisters, on what you're doing to make a difference, because, so many people complain about the conditions that we face in our society. We live in areas based on zip codes, Lena, that
Yes.
are tied to industrial locations that affect the quality of our lives. We live in old houses that have lead paint in them that imperil our health. We've got all these things going on in our environment, but at a certain point we stand up and we say, well, what can I do about it? And we do something about it. And that's what you are doing. Celeste Treese, founder of Ag Noir BIPOC Urban Farming Association. Thank you for joining us. The Earth Steward. I want to call her the Earth Goddess, the Earth
All
Mother,
right.
Miss Lena Boswell. Thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network. We will have this conversation again, and I promise I want to bring you back. I want to have Miss Mickey on. I want to have Tila on. I want to have Angela Sales on, who was tireless, who was motivated, she's a globe trotter, but she always
Mm-hmm.
knows how to get back to Cleveland to hook up her
Mm-hmm.
folks. We'll have all of them on and we will continue this conversation. Again, thank you for joining me on 360 Info Network.
Farming is the new prescription.
Yes. And with that, we will say we will agree to let food be our medicine as opposed to being a drug. Thanks
There
for
is
joining
no
us.
culture without agriculture.
There you
Tarika
go.
Duno. Mm-hmm.
There it is. All right. Once again, thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network. All right. So we got just a few moments left in the program. I just want to get this quick PSA in. There's going to be a program at East Cleveland Public Library. It's called Stolen People, Stolen Bones, Stolen Art. The question is, how did the remains of so many Black people and up in museums and other institutions in Cleveland, how did they end up there throughout the world, here in Cleveland and throughout the world? You can go and you can hear Fanon Hill and some others speak on this very important issue. And you can do that. It's going to be at the East Cleveland Public Library today at 2 p.m. So go on by there, check that out. Um, we want to say big ups to our engineer, Tone Harley. My brother, you do it for us every Saturday, and we are so appreciative of what you do. Shout out to our brother, Lynn Hampton, who was not able to make it on the program today. We'll look forward to him joining us again next Saturday. And as always, to those of you who are listening and watching us on Facebook and YouTube, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.